Many of us predicted that Donald Trump in these final few weeks before the election would become more and more unhinged, and with that he becomes more and more fascistic in his language. Now he's ignited a huge backlash, not just from Democrats but right across the political spectrum, after suggesting that the US military should be used against his political opponents during this upcoming presidential election. At her rally in Erie, Pennsylvania last night, Kamala Harris played multiple clips of Trump's threats and then said he considers anyone who doesn't support him or who will not bend to his will an enemy of our country.
Please roll the clip.
The worst people are the enemies from within.
The enemy from within. Those people are more dangerous, the enemy from within, than Russia and China.
These people should be put in jail the way they talk about our judges and our justices. Now, if you had one really violent day, one rough hour, and I mean real rough.
I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
You heard his words coming from him. He's talking about that he considers anyone who doesn't support him or who will not bend to his will an enemy of our country. It's a serious issue. He is saying that he would use the military to go after them. Think about this. And we know who he would target because he has attacked them before. Journalists whose stories he doesn't like. Election officials who refuse to cheat by filling extra votes and finding extra votes for him. Judges who insist on following the law instead of bending to his will. This is among the reasons I believe so strongly that a second Trump term would be a huge risk for America and dangerous.
Vice President Harris has been one of the few Democrats actually using the appropriate language. She says, I've said for a while now, watch his rallies, listen to his words. He tells us what he is. He tells us what he will do if he is elected president. Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged, and he is out for unchecked power. Now, let's just be very clear, because in isolation, these things, they all seem a little intangible. But when you put them together, you have the makings of an authoritarian, a dictator, somebody who is referring to enemy nations, Russia and China, from a military and diplomatic perspective, as being more friendly than people who have grown up in this country, contribute to this country, who might have an opposing political view to that of Donald Trump. The sheer fact that he refers to the media as fake news and says, look, we have a lot of them out there today. It's so frustrating, because to denigrate the free press, as he has done for the last decade, and to refer to them as the enemy of the people, when it comes to an election such as this, when you need the media, you need journalists, you need to have that additional safeguard in our democracy that is able to freely cover the news. He is basically interfering with a free and fair election by saying fake news for years. And I think people forget that the mark of an authoritarian is the way that he repositions reality and makes you think that he is the only person who can fix or save or protect. And actually, Donald Trump doesn't really care for any of those things, or for anybody, in fact, only for himself. And that is also the mark of a dictator and an authoritarian. In remarks that intensified concerns about a potential authoritarian approach if he wins back the White House, the Republican candidate proposed deploying the military or National Guard against what he called the enemy from within on Election Day, November 5th. He specifically targeted Californian Congressman Adam Schiff, who led the prosecution in Trump's first impeachment trial. He described Schiff as a greater threat to election integrity than foreign terrorists or illegal immigrants, two of his frequent targets. Now, just think what he's doing there. He's flipping the narrative. Trump is the threat to election integrity. Trump is already the one who is saying that if I don't win, it'll be rigged. And Adam Schiff is a lifelong public servant. And again, he has been created as this bogeyman when, in fact, he is one of the better lawmakers who has actually stepped up and taken part in the committee for the January 6th investigation, which, that is not for the faint-hearted, who's prepared to take the criticism that he knew that he would get for doing the right thing for America. And tragically, so many MAGA Republicans think Schiff is the enemy when he is actually trying to save them from dictatorship. Speaking to Fox News in response to a question about potential election chaos, Trump's comments drew sharp criticism from Kamala Harris's campaign team. They compared his rhetoric to previous claims that he would act like a dictator on day one of a second presidency. They also referenced his earlier suggestion to terminate the U.S. Constitution to reverse the 2020 election results, which Trump falsely maintains were stolen by Joe Biden. And as the election approaches, Trump and Harris are locked insanely in a close contest. And whilst Harris does have the lead in most national polls, the competition is tighter in key swing states that will ultimately decide the outcome, providing Trump with possible paths to victory despite his criminal convictions and this existential threat to democracy. Historian Ruth Ben-Ghiat, an expert in authoritarianism from New York University, said that Trump's comments reflect a pattern seen in leaders like Hungary's Viktor Orban or India's Narendra Modi and Russia's Vladimir Putin. She said he's actually rehearsing, in a sense, what he will be doing as head of state, which is what Orban does, and what Modi is doing, and what Putin has long done. Trump also targeted Schiff directly, calling him a lunatic and reiterating his belief that Schiff posed a greater internal threat. The thing that's tougher to handle are these lunatics that we have inside, like Adam Schiff, Trump said. This marks the second time in 2 days that Trump has attacked Adam Schiff, who's long been a political adversary to the disgraced former president. Schiff's currently running for another U.S. Senate seat, and he first drew Trump's ire as the leading Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee during Trump's presidency when he argued that there was evidence of collusion with Russia in the 2016 election. Schiff was later censured by the Republican-led House over these remarks, despite their truth. At a rally in Coachella, California on Saturday, Trump ridiculed Schiff's appearance and again claimed he was a bigger threat than foreign adversaries, including Chinese President Xi Jinping. Xi is somebody that we can handle, Trump said. The worst people are the enemies from within, the sleazebags, the guy that you're going to elect to the Senate, Shifty Adam Schiff. He's a major lowlife. Trump also accused Schiff of engaging in widespread voter fraud without any evidence. They send millions and millions of ballots all over the place, he alleged. In California, you don't have anything like a voting booth. They take ballots and they just send them all over the place. They come back and they say, oh, somebody won by 5 million votes. In response, Schiff took to Twitter, accusing Trump of inciting violence, similar to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. He said today Trump threatened to deploy the military against the enemies from within, the same thing he has called me, Schiff wrote. Just as he incited a mob to attack the Capitol, he again stokes violence against those who oppose him. That is authoritarianism. That is despotism. Harris's campaign echoed these concerns in a more detailed statement. They said Trump is suggesting that his fellow Americans are worse enemies than foreign adversaries, and he's saying he would use the military against them, said campaign spokesperson Ian Sams. Taken with his vow to be a dictator on day one, calls for the termination of the Constitution, plans to surround himself with sycophants who will give him unchecked, unprecedented power if he returns to office. This should alarm every American who cares about their freedom and security, Sams said. What Donald Trump is promising is dangerous, and returning him to office is simply a risk Americans cannot afford. And when they say Americans, they mean everybody. This is not a partisan issue. Having the uprising of a dictator in a democracy is not normal. We are warning you. This is the warning. This is the free press warning the public, saying, this is what's about to happen. Do not vote for it. I fear that there are too many people who have been brainwashed by Donald Trump over the last decade and are now in the mental position to think that he is the solution rather than the problem. Again, this is not a partisan subject. Everybody should fear authoritarianism. Everybody should fear an individual who thinks that they have the authority to ignore the Constitution, ignore the judiciary, ignore the rule of law, and just do whatever the hell they like. Trump's not actually in a position to deploy the military on Election Day. His remarks are reminiscent of the 2020 demand for troops in Washington to suppress protests following George Floyd's death. General Mark Milley, then chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, reportedly considered resigning over the issue. Milley, who has since fallen out of favor with Donald Trump, has been quoted in this new book by journalist Bob Woodward as calling the former president a total fascist. The general has expressed concerns that Trump could recall him to service and court-martial him if he regains office. You see, the number of senior military personnel, national security people who have held really responsible positions in government and in the military are all saying the same thing, that Donald Trump is an existential threat to humanity, not just in the US, but into the wider world as well. Why is that? Because he has changed all of America's alliances. He is aligned with Putin. He's aligned with Orban. He looks up to Kim Jong-un, not literally, but you understand the point. He thinks that military parades and having your people stand up to attention and listen is how America needs to be run. Donald Trump is a deeply flawed individual. It's his insecurities, it's his inner child that's the problem. And that's why the choice on November 5th is not about Trump and the Republicans or Harris and the Democrats. It's a choice between freedom and fascism, between despotism and democracy. And it's essential that just this once, even if you're a lifetime conservative, that you recognize that you care more about the Constitution, the rule of law, and the institutions that keep us safe in the United States, that there is only one choice to make, and that is to elect Kamala Harris as president. It's been made absolutely and abundantly clear. Nobody in their right mind should vote for Donald Trump. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.